The Mets won the last two games against Atlanta after losing the first two to split the series. Big step in the right direction for the Mets. Also, Griffin Canning got hurt last night. Looks like an Achilles. Mendoza basically said so after the game, and he'll be gone for the rest of the season. Who steps up to replace him in the pitching rotation? And we also have Mark Vientos coming back. Who's he replacing in the Mets lineup? Who's he replacing on the roster? We're going to talk about all that and more today on Mostly Mets. All right, first things first here. If you're new here and you end up liking this kind of content, please subscribe, give me a like, comment, whatever you want. And I'm going to get right into it here, talking about the Mets series split in Atlanta. Now, this stretch of 10 games was not very impressive for the Mets. The Mets did not play great baseball over the last couple weeks, but it looks like maybe with these two wins against Atlanta in really dominating fashion, that the Mets are getting back on track. I'm not going to say they're back yet. After the horrible baseball we saw for a couple of weeks, it's really hard for me to sit here and say all of a sudden they're back and they're going to start, going on a big run again. Although you do have the Pirates coming up, a team that they should take care of pretty easily, hopefully. But it's just a step in the right direction. They scored some runs. They got some clutch hits with runners in scoring position. They hit some home runs. Soto is hot. Pete got a couple of hits. Maybe he's starting to heat up a little bit now. And you've gotten some hits out of the bottom of the lineup, including guys like Mauricio and Beatty. Even, McNeil's come through. They've gotten some production out of the bottom of the lineup, which has been missing all season long. So, yes, the pitching is in trouble right now, but the Mets are back in first place. They dropped below the Phillies in the standings. It looked really bad. It looked like they were going to start free-falling. And then the Phillies got swept by the Astros, and the Mets split the series with Atlanta. So they kind of stopped the bleeding here, and that's really all this is. They stopped the bleeding. Now whatever happens next is going to define what happens, the rest of the season. And we're halfway through the season now, and the Mets are 48-34. They're on pace for about 95 wins, somewhere in there. So they're still a good team. But obviously they were on pace to win over 100 just a couple weeks ago. So really bad stretch here. And in these 10 games, I think they went 3-7. They won one game in Philly. And after getting swept by the Braves in Atlanta and then splitting with Atlanta in the home series. So not a great way to kind of go at your division opponents there. 7 with the Braves, 3 with the Phillies, and you go 3-7. Not a great way to go, but the last two were the ones that mattered to me because it seems like maybe it got them on track. But the pitching injuries are starting to pile up, and we saw Griffin Canning go down last night, non-contact injury. They called it an ankle injury, but after the game, Mendoza said it looked like, they're worried that it's an Achilles, and you could tell by the replay, it's an Achilles. If you've watched NBA with Kevin Durant and Tyrese Halliburton and all these guys where you see the snap in the calf, it was an Achilles right away. Seemed like Ron Darling knew it right away. And as soon as I saw the replay, you know what it is. And that's a terrible thing for Canning. You just never want to see a guy go down like that. It's a year at least injury, probably longer. And at Canning, who knows if he's ever going to be the same again. And it's really tough for a guy like Canning who was coming back after being so bad for so long and really showing that maybe he is a major league pitcher. Not a great one, but at least a mid-rotation to back into the rotation kind of guy who deserves a job every year. And this is a career-altering type of injury, and that's tough to see. I hope he comes back. Maybe by some miracle it's not as bad as we think it is, but just from that replay and the history of Achilles injuries, it doesn't look great. But hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully it's nothing or, not as serious as we thought, and he'll just be out for a while and come back. But I don't have much confidence that that's the case. But what that means for the Mets is it was kind of announced last night and even this morning that they will have Tidwell called back up to make the next start for Canning, which is smart because it's really only probably a one-start kind of thing because you do have Senga and Minaya scheduled to come back pretty soon. Now, we got some concerning news over Minaya because they found a loose body in his elbow, and he was shut down for a couple days, but he is back to throwing. They expect him to, maybe it's only going to set him back a few days, not a few weeks. Hopefully that's the case. But this has like Jacob deGrom vibes to me, where they keep saying he's coming back and he's close and he's in rehab starts and all this, and then it just never ends up happening, or it happens the last month of the year, or they try to rush him back. I'm not going to count on having Manaea back until he's scheduled to start for the Mets. I'm just not. At this point, I'm not going to say he's 10 days away, he's 2 weeks away. Whenever we get Manaea back is when we get him back. Now, Senga, on the other hand, obviously it wasn't a major injury, and as long as he has no setbacks, I don't see him being out for much longer. I know Mendoza said he's not going to need that much of a rehab because it's only a couple weeks of an injury, maybe a start, maybe 2 in rehab, but nothing crazy. I know he's throwing right now. I don't think he's throwing from the mound, but he is playing catch, kind of standing still and playing catch, so he's keeping his arm moving, and hopefully Senga can come back. But Senga is also one of those guys who is made of glass, and you're always worried about an injury with him. And I don't know that you can necessarily count on him to be back anytime soon either, just because his injury history is strange. He goes out with minor injuries sometimes, and they end up lasting months. So you never know with Senga what's going to happen. Hopefully this is a quick and easy one, and he's back soon. And then the rotation will be full. But right now, the Mets rotation is Peterson, Montas, Blackburn, Holmes, and now you expect Tidwell. Blackburn is awful. Tidwell, you don't really know what you have with him yet. His first start wasn't great. His last start, he was really good for the first 3 innings and then kind of fell apart a little bit in the fourth. So you don't know what you're going to get out of Tidwell, but I'm more than happy giving him a shot here. A young guy who is at the age and at the ability level where he's ready to come up and start contributing. I see him more of a reliever down the road, but right now they have a need in the starting rotation. I don't think he's going to be a 7-inning pitcher, but if you can get a solid 4, maybe 5 innings out of him, kind of like a better version of an opener, I think that's a great thing to have with, some length, if you can get some length out of your bullpen. The problem is the bullpen has been way overworked, so I am concerned about the pitching right now, especially with Tidwell not knowing what he's going to give you, and Blackburn, where you kind of know what he's going to give you, and it's mostly going to be bad. So, yeah, not too pumped about what the Mets have in the pitching rotation right now, but if they do get healthy, it will go back to being a nice, solid rotation. Now, if these injuries to Manaea and Senga end up going longer than you would hope or think that they will, maybe they are a few weeks away, or they have a setback, hopefully not. But if they do, then you can kind of start to look at some of the younger prospects that the Mets have, the ones that you're actually excited about. I don't think anyone's really excited about Tidwell. I think he has good stuff, and maybe he could be something, but he's not a top-ranked pitching prospect. He's not a top-ranked Mets prospect. He's just a decent guy who's kind of a swing man at this point, maybe a bullpen arm. But when you talk about guys like Brandon Sproat and Nolan McLean and Jonah Tong, those are guys you're kind of excited about. And maybe not Sproat as much anymore because he's pitched to almost a 6 ERA in AAA this year. But Nolan McLean has a 2.68 ERA in AAA this year. Now, it's only 6 starts and 8 appearances. It's not a big sample size, but he was doing great in AA as well. He's pitching to a 189 opponent average. He's got a 1.21 whip. He's just looked really good in AAA and really in AA as well. But none of those guys are on the 40-man roster, so you would need to clear a spot. Now, you would think Griffin Canning, if it is an Achilles injury, he's going to go on the 60-day injured list, which will open up a 40-man spot, and then that you can add a guy like McLean or Sproat or even a Jonah Tong. Now, Jonah Tong is a guy who's younger than the other two. He's only in AA right now, but he's completely dominating in AA. He's in 13 starts this year. He has a 1.75 ERA, and he has 107 strikeouts in 67 innings. So he's dominating at AA. And we would think that the promotion to AAA would be coming soon, but maybe he just gets a promotion right to the majors. It's not the first time we've seen that. It's not unheard of for a pitcher to go right from AA to the majors. I don't think the Mets would do that. I think Stearns is he's more patient, and his approach is a little bit more, he just doesn't do that type of stuff very often. Now, he did bring up Pintaro from Double-A, but that was a completely different situation. That's a 27-year-old pitcher. They just needed a bullpen arm. If Tong comes up, it's to, if he does well, to stay in the rotation. It's not going to be an up and down kind of thing. That's why I think it will be Tidwell for the time being, and unless there's any setbacks with the other guys, I don't think the other two will be called up anytime soon. But I think if they are, oddly enough, I think it will be Sproat. I know he has not performed well in AAA this year, but I think he was kind of the next in line. Before the season started, we saw him in spring training pitching pretty well. He was kind of up and down a little bit in spring training, but he was considered the next guy up. If they had an injury, if they needed a call-up, he would be in consideration for that. And I think with his AAA struggles, maybe that's changed a little bit, but I think they still have a belief in him, and that, if you're bringing up McLean or Tong even, I think that's more of a prolonged stretch. If you know you're going to need them for a month or 2 months, or if they do well in the rotation, you're going to just keep them there and they're not going back down. With Sproat, I think they feel like they can kind of move him up for a spot start here, or maybe just an extended audition, maybe 2 or 3 starts in a row, and then send him back down. I don't think they feel that way with the other two. I think they would rather call them up when they're ready and ready to contribute for the rest of the season, or at least a couple of months. So I think, oddly enough, it would be Sproat that would be the first call-up. I don't know anything, though. That's just my guess and my feeling about it. That's how they've kind of operated. They haven't always called up their best prospects for, a 1-start thing or a 2-start thing. They save those for when they're going to give them extended amounts of time. So, yes, the Mets pitching staff is kind of in a little bit of trouble right now if their injuries don't last much longer, but they do have help on the way, hopefully coming soon. Now, some good injury news coming out is that Vientos will be activated for tonight's game in Pittsburgh, and I was going over who I thought they were going to send down, whether it was Beatty and Mauricio or Jared Young, but the Mets seems like they already made that decision. It's being reported that Jared Young is being sent to AAA, and it's the right decision. Listen, Beatty, we've all seen struggle. I don't think Beatty was really in any trouble of getting sent down. I think the Mets don't mind having him kind of as a bench piece and a guy who can play from time to time. I don't know that they view him necessarily as a big player anymore. Maybe he's a kind of a part-time player or a bench bat. So I didn't think he really had any... there was nothing for him to prove in the minors, so I think they've, in their mind, just keep him in the major leagues, and he is what he is at this point. Just give him the playing time that he needs and see what you have there. But Mauricio, I was concerned that he was going to be sent down. Now, in his first week or so of being in the major leagues, he was looked very overmatched. He wasn't able to hit the off-speed stuff. He was struggling with the curveball and the slider, but you can see he can hit the fastball. But for a while, when they were facing good pitchers, they weren't throwing him any fastballs. They were making him chase and getting him out on all off-speed stuff. And then you can see when he faces maybe a little bit less of the competition, he can really hit. And I don't think that's going to be forever. I think he probably just needs a little more seasoning. So maybe a send down to the minors helps him in that sense. But he's another guy like Beatty who really has nothing left to prove in the minor leagues. He's just hasn't played much baseball in the last year. He was out all of last year and kind of started off this season slow, not getting into very many games early in the season. So to me, those are two guys that really they have nothing left to prove and nothing left to show in the minors. And in my mind, they need to just be here. They need to be in the majors, facing major league pitching to see what they are. I don't think getting them any seasoning in the minors is going to do them any good. It's the opposite of maybe an Alvarez, where he's been up for a few years. He's only 23, and he came up 3 years ago, basically, and has not spent any time in the minors. So for me, he needed a little bit more seasoning down in the minors. He was only really ever called up to begin with because he was so good when he first came up. And maybe that was a little bit of luck or whatever. Alvarez is in the minors. He needs to work it out down there, and he'll be back eventually. I still have faith in Alvarez. But Beatty and Mauricio are kind of the opposite. They're in their mid-20s now. It's time to either be major leaguers or not be. That's really what it is. So sending down Jared Young, who really has shown you not much of anything. Listen, he's got great bat speed. He hits the ball hard. He's hit a couple of home runs. But really, he's been a disaster as the left-handed DH option. And he's a guy that no Mets fan liked to see in the lineup every day. When that lineup came out, if Jared Young was in it, it wasn't a great feeling. I'd much rather have Beatty getting those left-handed DH at-bats or playing third base and giving Vientos DH at-bats or Mauricio getting those at-bats because they're young and they're part of the future. Also, it helps going into trade deadline season. You have to figure out who's going to be on your team and who's not, and who you're willing to trade and who you're not. So getting those guys at bats in the major leagues, if they perform well, not only do they help your team, but they also become more attractive to other teams when you're trying to make a trade. And we all know that the Mets have basically 4 guys that play 2 positions. So you're going to have to make decisions on those guys eventually, whether it's trading Beatty or Mauricio or even Vientos or Acuna. Those guys are all going to be, they're all kind of fighting it out to see who's going to stay and who's going to go. And I don't think David Stearns is trying to make any rash decisions here, but he's probably hoping that 2 of them really get hot and maybe he trades one of them. I see that being a really good strategy here. I just look at Mauricio. He could play second base. He could back up short. He can play the outfield a little bit. He can DH for you. Beatty, he can play third base. He can even play some outfield. He could play second base. He could be your left-handed DH. And he plays a much better third base than Vientos, so I would like to see Vientos DH more. But Jared Young provided you nothing but a left-handed DH option. He plays first base, but Pete Alonso never takes a day off. And there was no use for him on the team when you have young players who you're trying to see if they can stick. So it was the right decision. I know a lot of people thought it was going to be Mauricio, and with some of his at-bats, you can kind of see why people think that. I personally thought maybe it was going to be Mauricio, and it might have been until he hit that home run the other night and then went 3 for 4 in that game. So he's starting to look a little bit better, maybe starting to get it going a little bit, and you see the potential. He's got speed, he's got athleticism, he can hit for good power. He's just a good baseball player if he's right. He chases too much. He might not be the smartest player in the world all the time. He might not make the best decisions, but you can see the raw potential is there, and I think that's why he sticks around and why eventually he gets it going here. Now, as I said before, we're halfway through this season, and I'm not ready to say that the Mets are back. I'm just not. The 2 wins versus Atlanta is a big step in the right direction. And another thing that I find really a good thing here is the kind of reemergence of Dednail Nunez. His last 2 outings have been great. He's throwing 99 miles an hour again. He looks like the guy we saw last year before he got hurt. And I think if he can get going, he is the guy in the bullpen that has the ability to be a dominant setup guy for Diaz. And I think that's huge. You need that guy, and it's something that the Mets have really been missing all year. Even when you had Reed Garrett with an ERA under 1 or Brazaban was dominating, it never felt like they had that dominant back-end guy. They wanted it to be Stanek. It's not Stanek. They didn't seem like they had that back end of the bullpen, 8th inning guy to really be the bridge to Diaz. And if Nunez can continue to do what he's done in his last 2 appearances, you have that. And you saw it last year, and you're starting to see it this year. When he first came up, obviously he couldn't throw strikes. He was really struggling, and he just couldn't get it together. Now all of a sudden looks like he's firing on all cylinders, and I'm excited about that development here. And Nunez really getting going. That's going to be a huge boost for this team, and maybe it makes them think they don't need to go out and get an Aroldis Chapman or something to be a setup man for Diaz. If Nunez continues to do this, and they believe that he will, you still need some bullpen help at the trade deadline. I still would love to see a starter. I don't know who's really out there at this point, though, that you'd be excited about. It would probably be more guys like they already have, like another Manaya, or it's not like a top end necessarily of the rotation type of guy or top end of the rotation type of stuff that's out there. I saw Mets fans clamoring for Jacob deGrom, and that got shot down by John Heyman saying it's not going to happen. Jacob deGrom doesn't want to be in New York. Love the guy. He was great for this organization. He's not going to be a Met again. We need to give up on that. It's not going to happen. He does not like New York. He didn't hate being a Met. He just doesn't like cities. He's not a city guy. He's a small town kind of guy. He grew up in Florida. He's from the South. He's not a New York guy. And there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously it's disappointing that he doesn't like the area that basically brought him up and developed him and made him into a star in the major leagues. But it's his personal preference, and he's never going to waive his no-trade clause to come back to New York. So I don't really know what's out there in terms of starting pitching, so I don't know if the Mets will do that. I do agree they need another bat. I think a center fielder would be great. I love Tyrone Taylor, but he's a fourth outfielder. He's not an everyday starter. Jeff McNeil, yes, you can get him some time in center field. He made a great play the other night, robbing Ozuna of a home run, but he's not a center fielder. I think we have to be honest about that. He looks awkward out there. He makes the plays, but there's just it doesn't have the great look to it. I don't know. I don't see him as a center fielder. He's adequate there. He can do the job just fine. But I think we need a real legitimate starting center fielder. Cedric Mullins type. I wouldn't give up a lot for him. I don't think he's that great. I know there's a lot of people who want Luis Robert. Listen, the guy is one of the worst hitters in Major League Baseball this year. I know people say a change of scenery might help and get him out of Chicago in a bad situation and you'll see him start to hit again. I just don't buy it. Unless you're giving up nothing to get him, like a bag of balls to get him, there's no point of adding Luis Robert because he's not better than Tyrone Taylor right now. You need someone better. So, once again, I don't know who the upgrade is in center field right now, except for maybe Mullins, maybe Jarren Duran, but it seems like that's unlikely at this point. I don't know where the pieces are, but that's why we have David Stearns, who knows how to make deals and find people and work the phones and know who's available. So hopefully he can do that. Another power bat would be great. But yeah, the Mets have some needs. The Mets are not a perfect team halfway through this season. They've shown a lot of their flaws in the last couple of weeks. Their bullpen is clearly overworked. I still like the pieces they have there. I still like Brazoban. I still like Garrett. I like Stanek in a less pressurized situation. Even Buto's been pretty good lately, and he's not a guy I really love in the bullpen. But he's performed pretty well, and Stanek has performed better. So I think you have the makings of a really good bullpen. Obviously, Diaz as closer, been one of the best closers in baseball this year. So you have the makings of a really good bullpen. I think maybe adding one more piece there, maybe a starting pitcher if you can get a top-end kind of guy, but I just don't see that guy available. And you pick up a center fielder, I think the Mets would be at that point a real complete team. And, you also have these guys coming from the minors, whether it's Nolan McLean or Jonah Tong or maybe Brandon Sproat if he can get his act together down there in the minors, where you can be kind of excited about the future. I don't know what you're going to get out of them this year, but it's nice to see that we have options in the minors. Another option might be to bring up a guy like Jet Williams to play center field. He's not playing exclusively center field in the minors, but he is playing a lot. He's more middle infielder / center fielder, but he's been hitting really well. I think he's hitting over 300 in AAA or AA. I think he was just called up to AAA if I'm not mistaken, but he's just performed really well, and I could definitely see him as part of this team. Maybe they get a rental at center field, and maybe next year he kind of gets into that mix a little bit. Maybe he's a trade candidate if you're going for a bigger, better deal. But yeah, there's a lot of options, and that's nice to see in the minor leagues. I know I said the other day I don't see where the help is coming from, but when you really look at it, they do have help on the way. It's just maybe not ready or maybe not the guys you're expecting. But there is help on the way, and this is, right now, the best I've ever felt about this organization as a whole. This team has flaws. This team might not be as good as we thought. Maybe we overrated them. Maybe I overrated them a little bit. But in terms of the organizational health, I'm very confident in it going forward, and I think there's a lot of good things happening. So hopefully that continues. Mets play the Pirates for a 3-game series this weekend starting tonight. Hopefully they can beat up on a bad Pirates team and really get back on track. If you win the last 2 against Atlanta and then maybe you even sweep the Pirates, you feel like you're back on track. And then you go to Milwaukee, which will be a big series, a team that they played in the playoffs last year, obviously, a team that's been pretty good lately. So this is an important stretch coming up. Beat up on a bad team, play well against Milwaukee, and we'll see where it goes from there. Then we'll start talking about All-Star break and all that kind of stuff. And but we're halfway through. It's not early anymore, and the Mets are in first place, and that's always a good thing. So that's really all I got today. If you're still here, you like this kind of content, like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. And until next time, let's go Mets.